Over the last 2.5 decades, the Halo franchise has given players a number of enemy factions to fight in-game. From the iconic Covenant to the terrifying and parasitic Flood, to more minor factions like the Sentinels and Rebels. Suffice to say, Halo has certainly seen its share of variety in terms of antagonists. There is one, however, that despite being featured prominently in 2 mainline Halo games, has almost been forgotten to time as it never resonated with players the way the writers and developers intended. I am of course talking about the Prometheans, a faction that debuted in Halo 4 comprising of the last remnants of the ancient Forerunners, an up to this point mysterious, nuanced group of aliens who activated the Halo rings over 100,000 years ago to stop the parasitic Flood and save the galaxy at the cost of sacrificing themselves, with humanity being both their inheritors and their descendants. At least that's what Bungie had written. But when control of the Halo IP changed from Bungie to 343, all that was subject to change. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Prometheans' lore, weapon sandbox, and game design, and why they were essentially dropped by 343 and despised by players. Leave a like if you enjoy and want to see more content like this, and without further ado, let's get right into the tale and history of Halo's worst forgotten faction. The Prometheans. Cyborg-like robots serving the Forerunners containing formerly human souls that looked progressively more like Bionicles with each passing game. These guys were, to say the least, a convoluted mess within the lore for a variety of reasons. For starters, they were led by the Didact. If you read the books, you'll know that there are technically 2 Didacts, with one of them, the ISO Didact, more than likely being essentially reincarnated into the Master Chief, but that's another topic for another video. But the Prometheans' leader and main antagonist of Halo 4's story is the Didact, which I'll be referring to from here on out as just Didact for simplicity's sake. So the Didact is obviously someone of great importance, but at the start of Halo 4 he is imprisoned in a giant metal ball for reasons the game does not explain to us right away. He's also somehow still alive for over 100,000 years after the Halo rings activated, which the game never really explains. And he really hates humanity because, of course he does. And again, the game doesn't explain this, at least not right away. Halo 4 goes on for several levels until we reach this cutscene, where a character called the Librarian, aka the Didact's wife, aka the biggest exposition giver in the history of the Halo franchise, explains to the Master Chief over the course of about 5 minutes that humans are not actually Forerunners like was suggested throughout the original trilogy and flat out stated at the end of Halo 3, but humanity is instead the remnants of an ancient civilization of far more advanced humans that at one point, before the Flood took over the galaxy, were apparently at war with the Forerunners, and this is why the Didact hates them, because ancient humanity took over a bunch of Forerunner worlds. It was only revealed to the Forerunners later in their war with ancient humanity that the humans hadn't been attempting to invade and expand, that they were actually just running from the Flood, because in 343's universe, interdimensional travel exists, but phones and basic diplomacy do not. Where did the Flood come from, you ask? How did it all start? Why does ancient humanity have better technology than current humanity? That isn't actually answered in the game at all, and is instead relegated to about 1,000 pages worth of books. This is actually a big problem with all of 343's titles, and I don't want to get too off topic here, but pretty much all of their games, including Halo Infinite, require some degree of cross-media reading, watching, or otherwise investing heavy amounts of time to understand what is going on in the game you're currently playing. And I personally think this is a horrible way of telling a story. The vast majority of fans do not have the money, time, or even interest in following up on that much lore. External media outside of games should be supplemental, not essential. But we all know how well 343 handles external media. On that, another side note, by the way, is that the woman in charge of executive producing both Halo 4, MCC, and the Halo TV show never actually left Microsoft. She left 343 and moved on to become the head of intellectual property and expansion across all of Microsoft's IPs, including Halo. So, despite what many will claim, not all of 343's old management was fired. In this case, the woman who did so much damage to the lore and reputation of the Halo series actually got a promotion. Great. But I got distracted, so let's get back to the topic. So in the Librarian cutscene, it is revealed that the Didact had a special device called the Composer created. What does the Composer do? It essentially turns living things into computer AI, but at the cost of them losing their sanity, personalities, and basically degrading their minds to the point of being these mindless husks that can be commanded into battle like the droids from Star Wars. The Didact, with his extreme hatred of humans and the threat of the Flood on his doorstep, decides to use the Composer on ancient humanity so he can have a fresh batch of souls to use for his army of Bionicles, I mean Prometheans. This really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially because it isn't really elaborated on in-game. In external media, it's sort of explained that the Didact blames humanity for bringing the Flood to the Forerunner worlds and destroying them, and sees turning them into robot soldiers and making them fight the thing they brought as a sort of ultimate revenge, but in-game, he just ends up looking like any other generic sci-fi villain that hates humans just because. Of course, this is on top of the fact that the whole humans being Forerunners thing that is explicitly stated and confirmed not only at the end of Halo 3, but also by several ex-Bungie staff, is entirely retconned, but if it's retconned, then a lot of the elements of the previous games don't make any sense without the use of some serious mental gymnastics, and, well, suffice to say, we're off to a rough start here with the Prometheans. Unfortunately, it doesn't get any better after Halo 4, as by the end of the story, the Didact is defeated by a combination of the weakest grenade in the game and my 16-year-old fantasy of a dozen or so Cortanas jumping on top of him at once. And there's a nuke that goes off. That probably has something to do with it as well. At least you'd think, until the Didact is revealed to actually still be alive. In a comic. And then killed off in a comic. Then alive again in the book. And then dead again? I think? Like I said, Halo's lore under 343 is a convoluted and inconsistent mess. So the Didact is gone, but what about the rest of the Prometheans? Well, Halo 4 had a unique sort of DLC campaign called Spartan Ops. Let me know in the comments below if you want a video breakdown on that. But in Spartan Ops, Requiem, the artificially created planet built by the Forerunners that the Prometheans call their home, is destroyed. I mean, completely destroyed. It implodes on itself, gets swallowed by a sun, and then explodes like the Death Star in the first Star Wars movie. It's actually a pretty cool scene, if only the Halo TV show was this good. Really, the Spartan Ops cutscenes were actually decent. They're, in my mind, at least what the Halo TV show could have been if the writers bothered to have any respect for the franchise they were creating for, but we can't expect that out of modern gaming now, can we? So the Prometheans' homeworld, the place where, as far as we know, they're all stored, is destroyed. The Didact, their leader, is for all intents and purposes dead, so there can't possibly be any more Prometheans to wreak havoc on the galaxy, right?
Wrong.
So Halo 5 comes out, and not only are the Prometheans back, but they're appearing all over the galaxy, and they're led by a new Bionicle called the Warden Eternal. So the Warden Eternal apparently wants to simp for Cortana, who is alive now apparently, despite her emotional and very final feeling death scene in Halo 4. But now in Halo 5, she is apparently alive and well, working with even more cartoony looking Prometheans, and this whole game is just terrible story-wise. I could do a whole breakdown on everything wrong with Halo 5, but that's not what this video is about, and the long and short of it is that the Prometheans are back with no explanation whatsoever on how they ended up all over the galaxy, where they came from, or anything else, which is kind of a shame. I remember in the original Bungie Halos, it's stated quite clearly during the gameplay that the reason the Sentinels are so prominent, more on them in a bit, is because they were kind of the Forerunners' go-to security forces, with Sentinel factories being all across the galaxy to make more of them. It was just a simple in-game ambient dialogue that helped explain the origin of the Sentinels, and they could have done something similar in Halo 5, but for one reason or another, they just didn't. In fact, 343 hardly explains any of the lore at all this entire game. Halo 5 is full of plot holes, contradictions, and random moments that are just weird. The Warden Eternal is never explained, we never find out who he is, we never find out exactly how Cortana survived, it's all left very vague, we don't find out what happens to the Warden Eternal, why the Prometheans are under his control, where they went, what happened to the Guardians, also another major plot point of Halo 5, it's just all left unanswered. To this day, nearly a decade after Halo 5's launch, we have gotten no concrete answers as to what happened to these guys. So that's why the Prometheans don't work at all in the lore. Now let's talk about them from a game design standpoint. Like I mentioned earlier, they start off in Halo 4 as their own separate faction, though later in the game they do integrate into working with the Covenant, who hates humanity again despite the whole Great Schism thing from Halo 2, another thing that's not really explained in-game. But anyways, they start off as their own faction, and they're actually blue instead of the common orange that we see them in for most of Halo 4 as well as all of Halo 5. I think this is because initially they're under control of the Librarian? Maybe? Or maybe they're just under control of themselves and they don't want the Didact to be awakened? Also maybe? Again, the game of course doesn't tell us. But they start off blue, and I think this was actually a far better design and aesthetic for them to look more Forerunner. Just the simple color and lighting change makes them look so much more Halo, if that makes any sense. But appearance aside, the Prometheans only have 3 types of enemies within their ranks. That's right, only 3. There's the Crawler, the main infantry unit. They're these sort of dog-like things that have guns for mouths. Then there are the Knights, which are these big, hulking bullet sponges that have the infuriating ability to teleport. More on that in a bit. And then there are the Watchers, which serve as a kind of support unit for the Knights and Crawlers. Let's break these down one by one. So the Crawlers are basically the Promethean equivalent of Grunts. They carry a wide variety of weapons and can be everything from a frontline charging enemy that behaves like an attack dog to a long-range scouting unit that hangs from the walls like an ant, picking you off from afar. These guys are probably the least offensive of the Promethean units, save for the fact that they almost all look the same and are extremely hard to identify at any kind of distance. Allow me to explain. So, Crawlers, or Pawns as they're called in the game files, have different weapons as I mentioned, but the weapons they carry don't appear on their actual bodies, and are instead built into their heads, which have only very slight differences in appearance to each other, making them hard to differentiate between. Compare the Promethean Crawlers to the Grunts from Bungie's game. Here we can clearly see that this Grunt is a minor, the weakest and most ill-equipped of the bunch, while this one is a major, a little bit tougher. Tougher still is the Grunt Ultra. This guy might actually mess you up if you aren't careful. Now let's look at 343's Crawlers. Can you, at a quick glance, tell the difference between any of these? Of course not, especially at a distance. This leads to a lot of confusing moments in gameplay where certain Crawlers will be quite vicious and charge at you, while others you weren't even aware of had sniper rifles will one-shot you from afar. More on that in a bit as well, but let's move on to the Knights. The Knights are these hulking, almost beetle-like mechanoids that have tiny little T-Rex arms for some reason. They're interesting looking, I'll give them that, but they're a far cry from Bungie's original concept of the Forerunners, and they look out of place entirely, especially given the fact that they're orange now. I really can't emphasize enough how keeping them blue and just sticking to the original art style and color palette established by the earlier games would have made for a much nicer overall experience, but looks aside, these guys are infuriating to fight, especially in Halo 4. In Halo 5 they were slightly improved, and 343 used them more as mini-bosses, but for some reason in Halo 4 these guys are spammed almost everywhere. Not only are they bullet sponges, but their shields recharge very quickly, and they have an unlimited ability to teleport anywhere on the map at any time, an ability that they'll often use as soon as their health starts to dip below about 50%. This combined with how spammy they are is infuriating, especially on higher difficulties. Note I said infuriating, not challenging. Challenging is a well-programmed, well-thought-out AI. The Knights just lazily teleport away, running from every fight to the point where Halo 4 on Legendary basically devolves into empty weapon into Knight, watch Knight teleport away, repeat until dead or lucky. Then there's the Knight's charging ability. They have a sword, which is really cool by the way, built into their arm. They use that sword in combination with this teleporting dash ability where they can phase through certain objects and travel across the battlefield to get to you. Another infuriating thing on virtually any difficulty. To be fair, there is a tell when they're about to charge that a skilled player can look out for, but they just don't work with how often they're spammed on the levels. In reality, the Knights should have been more of a boss enemy or a mini-boss, kind of like the Hunters are throughout the rest of the Halo franchise, where they were placed here and there as a challenge for the player to get past, but because they're spammed so much in Halo 4 especially, and to a lesser extent in Halo 5, they just end up being these infuriating, annoying time wasters. But I can't talk about the Knights without talking about their babies, the Watchers. Now I call the Watchers the Knights' babies because, well, they literally give birth to them. Gross. Let's continue. So the Watchers are a support unit. They fly around the map and generate shields for the Knights. They can also toss back grenades the players throw, and as a concept I actually think these guys are really cool. They look a bit odd, once again, like the Knights and Crawlers they look nothing like Halo, but the concept is definitely neat. The problem I take with the Watchers is that, like their maternal counterparts, they're also a bit tanky. They have a small energy shield that recharges relatively quickly, and their AI is programmed to constantly flee from fights, and they, like the Knights, are spammed everywhere. Not only that, but their worst ability is that they can revive Knights. Yes, the giant hulking monsters that often take a large portion of your ammo to put down, can be revived. Easily. They also spawn in herds of crawlers, which isn't that big of a deal, I just thought it was worth a mention. Overall, Halo 4's initial lineup of Promethean enemies are frustrating and tedious to fight rather than fun and engaging like their coveting counterparts. Playing a lot of Halo 4 for footage for this video, I found myself actually enjoying the sections of the game with the Covenant, but as soon as the Prometheans showed up on the screen, I knew I was in for a rough time. Halo 5 did add in one more variant of the Prometheans, simply called the Promethean Soldier. These guys looked more like generic Bionicles than the Prometheans from Halo 4 did, and had similar teleportation abilities to the Knights, though I will say they were far less annoying as they were nerfed quite a bit. Overall, Halo 5's Prometheans in general, while still not particularly fun to fight, did remove a lot of the tedious, more infuriating aspects about them. But now we need to talk about the weapons sandbox added by the Prometheans, and oh boy is it ridiculous. So Halo 4 and 5 basically more or less have the same exact Promethean weapons, with the exception being the special variants unique to Halo 5, as well as the Sentinel Beam, which for some reason did not appear in Halo 4 at all. There are Sentinels themselves all over the game, and it's the first game since the original Combat Evolved to not let the player use their laser beams, but I digress. So the Promethean arsenal consists of the bolt shot, the light rifle, scatter shot, suppressor, pulse grenade, binary rifle, and incineration cannon. These range from absolutely terrible to absurdly overpowered. Let's start with the Promethean's equivalent to the BR, the light rifle. This one is probably the least offensive of the bunch, and before I rip into these, I do want to say as a positive and perhaps a shock to some of my regular viewers that I actually like the way most of these are designed. The way the Forerunner weapons just kind of build themselves in the player's hand and take themselves apart to reload is really, really cool, and I wish we saw more of that in other Halo games. I love these animations, and of all the things I could criticize, the animations is definitely not one of them. But back to the light rifle. In Halo 4, it has a 3-round burst function when not zoomed in, and a more powerful semi-auto fire when zoomed. This was actually pretty cool and unique for the time, and I don't have any complaints about it. It felt balanced, the animations were cool, and it just worked. In Halo 5, it's much the same thing, only it's exclusively semi-automatic, and it functioned as a nice in-between between the sniper rifle and the DMR, so also no real issues there. Then we have the suppressor, and in Halo 4, this thing is terrible, especially in multiplayer. It's basically an SMG in functionality with very slow-moving projectiles, making it almost impossible to use even at mid-range. At close range, it isn't much better due to how little damage each projectile does. If you can believe it, this thing used to actually be even weaker during the original launch of Halo 4 back in 2012 before it got a buff in the weapon tuning update. At the end of the day, it's got a cool sound effect and the reload animation is nice, and it feels like it would have gone perfect to use up against the Flood in campaign, if only there was Flood in Halo 4's campaign. A missed opportunity there in my view, as I think this would have been great to pop infection forms with, sort of like a Forerunner version of the Halo 1 assault rifle, but unfortunately that's not possible. The only advantage to using the suppressor in Halo 4 is that ammo is plentiful for it. In fact, there's almost too much ammo. The only time I ever see this thing getting used is on Promethean heavy levels, and they are such a drag. I've said this in a previous video before, but the levels in Halo 4's campaign that are heavily centered around the Prometheans almost force you to use their weapons. There's very little UNSC weapons, almost no Covenant weapons, and you're basically forced into this awkward combination of scavenging for any light rifles you can find, but most of the time being relegated to using bolt shots and suppressors. If you try to use this thing in multiplayer, you're inherently at a disadvantage because the assault rifle and the storm rifle, or literally any other weapon, is just going to be better in every way. The Halo 5 version was improved slightly, receiving an added tracking ability, faster projectiles, and a gradually increasing fire rate, but I think the damage to this thing's reputation was already done with Halo 4. Plus, it is easily the worst looking of the Promethean weapons. The reload animation, like I said before, is nice, but the gun itself looks like a giant, weird, triangle, trapezoid-shaped thing. I don't even know what to call it. It's just ugly. Moving on from the rejected SMG, we have the bolt shot, and oh my god, the source of my rage in Halo 4. 343 thought it was a good idea to give Halo players in multiplayer a pocket shotgun. This thing became the new noob combo back in 2012. In Halo 4, the bolt shot has two fire modes. One that might as well shoot popcorn at your enemies because, I mean, look at how little damage it does. I can't even kill a single grunt without a headshot, even though I emptied the entire magazine. And the other fire mode is like a plasma pistol charge up that releases an insta-kill shotgun blast. They put this as a standard loadout weapon in Halo 4's multiplayer. Bolt shot corner camping galore ensued, and I can positively say that back in the day, this is one of the #1 reasons why I didn't play as much Halo 4 multiplayer as the other games. It was infuriating. Players with low shields, no skill, or just overly sweaty people would use this thing day in and day out, and it breaks the entire balance of Halo's gameplay. The funny thing is that if you run a custom game and you don't allow people to use the bolt shot as much, Halo 4 is a lot more fun. Attack me in the comments for saying that if you want, but it's just a fact. The Halo 5 version of the bolt shot was improved slightly like the suppressor in that they made it a 3-round burst with a similar tracking effect, and they removed the annoying pocket shotgun feature, but like the suppressor, I think this thing's reputation was already ruined by Halo 4. Also, in both Halo 4 and 5's campaign, it is way too prevalent and is often the only weapon with any ammo in it, so while the animations are cool for reloading it, they get old very, very quickly. Next up, getting into the power weapons, we start off with the scatter shot. It's a neat looking Forerunner shotgun that does significantly less damage than the standard UNSC shotgun. It's actually kind of worthless, and much like the suppressor, you're at a disadvantage if you're using this over any other close range weapon. It has this ability where it can bounce the rounds off of walls, but they're usually not that useful considering that they're less powerful than direct hits, which are already weak enough as it is. The Halo 5 version is more or less the same, so let's move on to the true power weapons. The most overpowered weapons in all of Halo, especially with the Halo 4 versions of these. First up is the Incineration Cannon, and it is an absolute beast in Halo 4. One shot and this thing will take out just about anything, and it looks pretty cool as well. Maybe not super Halo-esque, it always looked like something that would have come out of Transformers to me, but still pretty cool nonetheless. It received some pretty substantial nerfs in Halo 5, which turned it into a burst/charge weapon instead of the massive tool of destruction it was in Halo 4, but either way, each version of it isn't actually that bad. The next and last of the proper power weapons we have is the Binary Rifle. It's a 2-shot sniper that, with its Halo 4 iteration at least, can one-shot enemies regardless of where you hit them. I mean it, if you hit someone's big toe with this, they are literally going to disintegrate. I controversially like this one. It's pretty easy to counter in multiplayer as it puts out this giant, very visible red beam when aiming, alerting everyone that a sniper is nearby, so not really an issue there, but a lot of people did take issue with the fact that it was just a one-shot, one-kill. In the campaign, it can also get a little bit annoying, but no more annoying than, say, the Halo 2 sniper jackals on Outskirts. Really, the Forerunner power weapons themselves aren't too bad. In fact, I actually kind of like them for the most part. It's the loadout weapons from Halo 4 that are just awful though, especially the suppressor and bolt shot. I, to this day, hate that thing. But moving on to the less, I don't want to say proper, but the sort of less common weapons. Let's take a look first at the pulse grenades. They are not good. In Halo 5, they're basically just insta-kill stand-ins for the old firebomb grenade from Halo 3, and in Halo 4, they try to serve as an area denial weapon, only they don't really work because the amount of damage they do to anyone that enters their little fire sphere, or whatever you want to call it, is so minimal, they might as well not even be used. To add to this, if you select the pulse grenades in your loadout in Halo 4, you only get one for some reason, while all other grenades you get 2 by default, so there's really no reason to use these. A lot of the loadout weapons in Halo 4 on the Promethean side of things tend to put you at an inherent disadvantage if you choose them over their UNSC or even Covenant counterparts. Moving on from the pulse grenade, we have some more obscure Forerunner weapons, which includes the Splinter Turret, which only appeared in Halo 5, and the Halo 5 Sentinel Beam, which was added to the game well after it came out. So I'm not really sure if you can consider this one a Promethean weapon, but it is Forerunner, so I'm looping it in there nonetheless. The Splinter Turret is just a turret that shoots little orange balls that explode into smaller orange balls. It's Not that interesting. It's not terrible. It's not great. It's just kind of there. The Sentinel Beam is the Sentinel Beam from all the other games. It's not much different. It's pretty cool. Cool that they added it in. Not sure why it wasn't there on launch. Not much more to say about that. But what I wanted to talk about most here is the god-awful Promethean armor abilities from Halo 4. The first and least offensive is the Hard Light Shield. It's not too bad. It's basically just a riot shield type of thing. It looks nice. It's blue. I actually use a lot, and I don't hate this one. But then there's the other two. The first being Promethean Vision, which is a whole story in and of itself. It is literally built-in wall hacks. It allows you to see through walls, which is kind of cool, but why? What purpose does this really serve? I mean, I guess it's good for rooting out bolt-shot corner campers, but other than that, I mean, in campaign and multiplayer both, audio cues are usually enough to figure out where the enemies are. And there are just better armor abilities to use, so it ends up feeling like something that doesn't really need to exist. But the worst armor ability, not just in Halo 4, but out of any of the Halo games, is probably the auto turret. This ability will have your Spartan doing this weird, like, power pose while he conjures a floating Forerunner turret out of thin air like it's Skyrim or something. During said power posing, your Spartan is vulnerable to enemy fire, and it just looks really weird. I don't know why a Spartan would need to do this weird, like, look up at the sky and flex thing to summon a turret. It really doesn't make any sense. On top of that, the turret itself fires a similar projectile to the bolt shot. No, not the charged up overpowered pocket shotgun attack, it's just the regular bolt shot, the one that can't kill a grunt when you empty a full magazine into it. And we were supposed to use this against bullet spongy enemies in the campaign and actual players in multiplayer. Suffice to say, I almost never use it, and people that do usually do so out of morbid curiosity or by mistake. The auto turret in Halo 4 has to be one of the most worthless things in the entire sandbox, and I'm not sure who came up with it or what happened to it. So that is the entire Promethean sandbox, only 3 or 4 different enemy types if you're counting Halo 5, and just a handful of weapons that are, needless to say, a very mixed bag. After Halo 5, the Prometheans and their weapons were inexplicably never seen again. The ending of 5 has you believing that Cortana has turned evil and gone mad with power. Funny enough, that was actually a rejected plotline for Halo CE, but anyways, Cortana went mad with power, controlled both the Prometheans and the Guardians, which were these giant metal bird things, and that's it. We never find out what happened to the Prometheans, and their weapons were just never seen again. The Banished took over as the new antagonist faction in Halo Wars 2, and then 343 realized that people liked them so much, so they decided to make them the main enemy in Halo Infinite last minute. Sort of, but that's another topic for another video perhaps. It's kind of a shame all the lore 343 built up around the Forerunners and the Prometheans, and even the Guardians, just to drop it entirely. While it wasn't good and they didn't really fit in, it also would have been nice to see a truly new faction instead of the Covenant but red, which is basically what we have in Halo Infinite. It really feels like the Halo 4 and 5 era in general of Halo was a completely different time. Originally, Halo 4 was meant to be the first in a trilogy. Then there was talk of it becoming a saga. But due to the massively negative and in my opinion mostly justified backlash 343 got during the course of those games' life cycles, 343 decided to pull back altogether and do a soft reboot starting with Halo Infinite. Though I would say the claimed reboot and return to form felt more like a cheap imitation of Halo 3 without any of the things that made Halo 3 great. With Infinite also adding some of the worst trends of modern gaming into Halo, including battle passes, wacky out-of-place skins like banana armor and cat ears, monetized color customization, absurdly bad optimization, and writing that would make even Halo 5's writers cry. Look, I'm not saying for a second that Halo 4 or especially Halo 5 was good in any sense of the word, just that Infinite, for the big quote-unquote spiritual reboot it was supposed to be, has been more like a spiritual desecration, where Vulture-like devs swoop in and pick apart what little is left of the collective whole of the Halo community's rotting corpse. I'm genuinely terrified to see what will come out of the alleged Combat Evolve reboot, with even the employees of 343 themselves rumored to be expressing distaste with the quality of the product they're currently working on. Combine this with the fact that they put this guy, This same guy that left MCC in a disastrous state after over a decade of being broken, in charge, and I don't have much hope for Halo right now. It's part of the reason why I haven't been talking about it on the channel as much of late. It just seems like a moot point. But that is going to be it for me. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like on it and let me know what you thought of the Prometheans, and if you want to see more deep dives into the more forgotten 343 era Halo stuff. I'd love to do a video on the spin-offs nobody seems to talk about, so let me know. Subscribe if you're new, and support me on Patreon if you like what I do. You can get into the channel Discord for only $5, where we host Halo game nights a couple times a month over on MCC. It's pretty fun, so check it out if you're interested. As always, thank you so much for watching, especially if you've made it all the way to the end, and have a great day, and stay safe. Goodbye.